Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first Beers and Ideas of 2023. That is absolutely ridiculous that we find ourselves at the end of October only doing the first one of the year. But as Jamie was pointing out beforehand, it's because we've got so much fan mail after the Christmas edition. Mainly because Joe Hanley was on, I'd imagine. Probably nothing to do with us. We've spent our time responding to the one letter that we got. And here we are. We find ourselves here again, and those regulars or the regular Beers and Ideas fan will have noticed that there's an extra Beers and Ideas participant. And tonight we're joined by Louise Clough. Louise, hello.
Hello.
Good to see you. Now we've met before because you often come into Sunderland University where me and Jamie are at to kind of deliver stuff to the students and do bits and pieces. So we've met you before. You've been introduced to George, but how about you introduce yourself to the listeners and the viewers? Tell us a bit about yourself as well. That'd be really nice.
Well, I'm Louise, as Stephen just said. I'm a person with lived experience of social workers. And I've been a co-educator at Sunderland University for about between 15 and 20 years now. So I think that's longer than a lot of the social work lecturers.
Well, longer than all of us. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I live with my husband and my two chihuahuas, called Darcy and Pudding. I don't really, I kind of, I'll explain what a co-educator is actually, and then we can go on from there if that's okay.
Yeah, perfect.
A co-educator means I work alongside the social work lecturers and doing the assessed interviews, part of the communications module of all of the social work degree courses. I'm also involved with in interviewing potential student social workers as well. So it's not easy, but it's enjoyable. Really, I really love meeting the potential students, and then I love working with them as well on the course.
Brilliant.
I think
Excellent.
Certainly, well, just jump in there, Steve. I think Louise sent us a little bit short there, because Louise has been supporting me in writing and developing a new module which we're going to introduce next year. So we've got some more work to do on that. But we've got the bones of it, Louise, haven't we, with yourself and other co-educators. So I think there'll be more delivery as well. And we'll see how that develops. Very interesting times.
Very good. Very good.
Looking forward to doing that.
Very good, very good. Well, just to take the serious edge off this for a moment, Louise, when I was preparing for that, I came across your Facebook profile. Now, I have to ask. I'll probably flash it up on the screen at this point. Well, I'll probably edit it in, obviously with your permission. But what's going on? Tell us about the Facebook profile picture and just what on earth is going on there. What's happening?
Well, it was an 80s night, so I ordered. It was a pink tutu.
Yeah,
it was pink.
Sure was.
It was a pink bum bag. I bought a T-shirt that had some logo on about the 80s.
Yeah.
Did I have something in my hair? I can't remember if I think I did. I had one of those hairbands with a pink net.
All right. I don't know. It was just the pink tutu that caught my eye, to be fair. Brilliant.
I had bombers as well, pink leg bombers.
So who's your favourite 80s band? And this is now a very serious question.
It's got to be Duran Duran.
Oh, yes. Result. Love Duran Duran. George, what about you? You look like an 80s sensation.
Serious answer, the Smiths. Fun answer, Wham.
Oh, yes. Absolutely. Wake me up before you go. Yeah. Sorry, what was that, Louise? I think I got the name.
It's Wham.
Yes. Absolutely. Jamie, can you remember the 80s? Because you're just a young lad.
I can't, but my mum tells us about them. But the 80s, I was about to switch my camera off, my computer off, with the lack of coolness. The Smiths. Wham, Duran Duran. My band of the 80s would have to be Madness. A band I've seen many times.
Oh yeah, good shout. Not a band I would have naturally thought of in terms of the 80s.
And a band I've seen with your good self, UB40. I want to see them.
We did see UB40, didn't we?
I want to see the Who.
We went to see the Who. Yeah, yeah. I didn't want to go. That was the reality of it. But the tickets ended up being that cheap that I couldn't resist going to see these icons.
You couldn't justify saying no anymore.
Stadium Rock, yes. But Jamie was in his element the whole night. He was. If there'd been tables, he would have been dancing on them. Which my favourite band, as you've probably seen there, would be Duran Duran as well. Louise loved Duran Duran. Their first album, Careless Memories, Planet Earth, brilliant.
Best one, yeah.
Brilliant.
I've seen them 3 times as well.
Have you? Excellent. Yeah. Oh, I've never seen them. Wow.
Are they still alive?
That's not good. That's not good at all.
No. I should have been to see them really, but no, never seen them. But they still tour, don't they?
Mm-hmm. They do. Last time I saw them was about 7 years ago.
Right. Excellent.
Well, if they come to the Northeast, I think with 4 of us should go. I'll see if I can, through my musical contacts, I'll see if I can bag with some VIP tickets.
Well, Simon Le Bon he'll hear this, and he'll be asking us to come on stage with him, won't he?
Yeah.
He'll be like being the #1 fan.
Absolutely. Let's introduce the beers before we get on to the ideas.
Wow.
I've got our game show host. Jamie, go first because you were desperate to pour your beverage.
I've started.
All right. Okay.
Well,
what you got?
Well, I've got this called the Hop Foundry, from the Hop Foundry. I've got it's a tropical ale. Nice. I got from Aldi. I will say that because we are being sponsored by Aldi today. I did try. We were Brewdog were trying to sponsor them, and it was quite a lucrative deal. But it just sorry.
We decided that should be the British Sign Language sign for Brewdog. That's caught on, yes.
Stamping on the grapes, oats. But yeah, so I was in negotiations with them, and it got to I said 300 million. 3 million. That's 300. That's ridiculous. 3 million for the sponsorship, and they only could get 2.7 million.
Excellent. That's gone to your head.
So I turned down Brewdog and Aldi. And I was sponsored, and they amassed a £3 million sponsorship deal.
Brilliant. Well, I'll wait for that to appear on my bank account. Louise, what beverage are you drinking tonight? Are you an Asian woman, or have you got something different?
No, I'm afraid I don't drink beer, but I have a glass of rosé here.
A glass of
and
rosé.
I have bottle of water as well because it's 12% this wine. I normally just drink about a 5% wine.
Brilliant, excellent. And you're doing this on a Monday night, you know what I mean?
I didn't buy it. I just won it in a raffle, so I thought I'd open it tonight and see what it's like.
Seems like a good occasion. A nice rosé. Brilliant, excellent.
I'm going to call it Wines and Minds then, Steve. Now. Oh,
I have to. It's just ruined the whole title, hasn't it? We're going to have to rethink the whole thing now. Do you know what I mean?
I do apologise.
Oh, don't apologise. No, don't apologise. Anything to zhuzh the show up a bit. You know what I mean? Anything that's going to kind of add some zhuzh somewhere. George, what you got?
Supporting the other juice supermarket, Lidl, I've got 0% Perlenbacher, which comes in a box of 6, and it's very cheap, and it doesn't taste too bad.
That's all right. So alcohol free.
Alcohol free, yeah.
Did you get any sponsorship money for that, George, to go in the kitty?
No. But my other plug is, the reason we got this is because it sells one of the only gluten-free beers that wife gets, so she got us these when she got them. Gluten-free, alcohol-free. There's some gluten-free with alcohol in, there's not many gluten-free alcohol beers out there on the market.
Wow. Well, there you go. Well, Eh?
I'm co-hosting today.
Oh,
See
go on.
what kind of beers you got today.
Well, as you know, I'm Jamie's middle class friend. Well, Jamie's middle class really, but he just tries not to be. But you know, to all intents and purposes, I went to Sainsbury's, and I've got a Northern Monk Faith quality ale, if ever there was one, hazy pale. And
What percentage is that?
well, it's 5.4, so I'm there with Louise. By the time I drink this, I mightn't make any sense. I mean, I don't make much sense at the best of times, but I might not. But also got with me an emergency snowball.
No.
just in case the one beverage doesn't suffice. I've got an emergency snowball, and I've even brought me bottle opener. Even got me bottle opener. Do you know what? I made that bottle opener at school.
Wow, that's amazing.
And I'm 56, so I made that when I was about 16. Yeah, and it still functions.
That's older than me.
Absolutely. You know, it's back in the day, when we were all at school. You made an ashtray and a bottle opener, didn't you? Do you know what I mean? Because we didn't care about those things back then. So there you go. Anyway, before, because the reason Louise is here, I should probably say this, is she's going to introduce the idea. She's going to kind of introduce a thought, an observation, and then we're going to talk about it. But before then, I have the Beers and Ideas quiz.
Oh,
Now then,
thanks for the warning.
4 questions. I was just interested. We're not doing one for such a while. So here, first question, and Louise has alluded to an answer here, but it's not right, interestingly, because she said she'd listened to 5 of these. Now she's got more to do, because how many Beers and Ideas do you think we've had? How many have we done?
7.
How many? 7. Louise reckons 5 because she's listened to 5. George?
11.
Oh, good shout. George gets the mark there because we've done 12.
What?
So this makes this Beers and Ideas 13, if you're unlucky, if you're feeling unlucky. So when did we do the first one?
Was it 60s?
60s.
2020. No, because this was happening. Teams happened. Now we'll go 2020.
And what season? We'll go just a season.
Winter
2020. Louise, what do you think?
Oh, I think.
No, actually, I'm wrong. It wasn't.
Oh no, you've gone now. No, you've given your answer. No, you can't. You can't start rescinding your answer. No, you can't. Go on, Louise. What do you think?
Spring 21.
Spring 21. Okay, George.
Summer 2020.
Oh, George, you're nailing this. Absolutely. Summer 2020. In fact, August the 7th, 2020. Well, that was the first. That was when it went live. I don't know when we recorded it. What was the first one about?
Decor.
Yes.
Yes. George. Well, yeah. Go Decor. Decor and his barrel of apples. And a one for the viewers and listeners to vote on themselves underneath the video and what have you. Who's the best looking of the 3 Beers and Ideas amigos? So again, let's have a vote underneath the video and underneath the podcast, and let's see who comes out on top. Do you know what I mean?
Is there enough? How many? What's the maximum number I can go up to? Because is there a limit? It's going to millions.
I think the internet would crash if it goes up to a million or something like that. So there you go. We'll find out, won't we? So that was the Beers and Ideas quiz. So right, all of that aside, all of this guff aside, let's get to the important stuff. So it's really nice to have Louise along, because she brings a different perspective to our usual drivel, I suppose. So Louise, what do you want us to talk about? And feel free to introduce and talk for a while, and then we'll have a think about whatever it is you raise with us. So over to you.
I wanted to talk about some of the ethics and the principles which are the guidance for social workers in England to adhere to, and how and why they maybe aren't working in practice in some instances. I've recently had cause to sort of question them, not for me, but for a couple of people who I'm friends with, and it was regarding a hospital discharge. I also set up a messenger group to ask some of my friends, because I have a lot of disabled friends, to see what they came back with. And I wanted both positive and negative, you know, because we don't always want to hear the negatives. We want to hear positives about what social workers do. You know, this is the whole point in doing what we do, I suppose. And basically, sort of, a lot of comments came back about maybe not listening properly, and not sort of not providing the support that maybe somebody might need. And one of the other things I think people were saying was that a lot of social workers who they have had in their lives haven't always been receptive to their needs, and that has been a really big part of their sort of problems with social workers, I think. And I don't know whether that's in the individual social workers or whether it's something else. But I know a lot of my friends who I did ask have come back with more negatives than positives, unfortunately. And I think for me personally, I haven't had a lot of interaction with social workers. Luckily, I'd say that has been fortunate, not unfortunate. I haven't really needed them in my life a lot. But when I have had to have them in my life, I've had a mixture of sort of positive and negative results, such as when I first I heard about direct payments. I went on a training course to see what direct payments were, and I then asked for a social work assessment. The social worker came out to see me. He had no idea what direct payments were. I was one of the first people within my local authority to get direct payments, so I can understand maybe why at that time we didn't know what they were. But once I got them, it made my life so much easier. And he took on board what I was saying. So that was it was negative and positive in a way. But I did get my direct payments. But over the years, they have reduced my hours. I'm kind of, I suppose I'm on my limit now. I couldn't go any lower. So if some hours were taken off me, it would really have an impact. But I think I have made loads of notes as well about what some of the Social Work England's professional standards are about. And the 1.4 of the Promoting the Rights and Strengths and Wellbeing of People says to value the importance of family and community systems and work in partnership with people to identify and harness the assets of those systems. I think a lot of people are saying as well that the family aren't being included within their sort of discussions with social workers. If I can sort of give an example, really, it's not. This is why I wanted to talk about this in the first place, because of my two friends, really, and the hospital discharge. I'm not going to mention any names at all, but I do have their permission to sort of talk about it. So it's quite disheartening, really. Both people have different care plans, and I'll call them Mr. and Mrs. B. So Mrs. B has an agency, and Mr. B has both an agency and personal assistant. Mrs. B unfortunately broke her leg, and she has had to have a full cast on her leg. She's been in hospital for about 8 weeks now. The consultant told her not to wait there, so she was having to be hoisted in the hospital. When it came to talking about discharge from the hospital, the social worker came to see her, and this was a few weeks before she was actually discharged. And it was established that Mrs. B had to have a hospital bed, a portable hoist, and a commode chair at home to enable her to go home. Plus, she would need another care agency to provide more assistance with the hoist, because you need 2 carers in order to hoist somebody. So they were going to be going in for 4 times a day for different things. Mrs. B had asked the social worker if she could have a list of care agencies that the local authority uses. Unfortunately, the social worker refused to give her a list of agencies. The reason behind that was because they had used agencies in the past and it hadn't worked out for them. They had to get rid of the agencies and use different agencies. So she wanted to know who the social worker was going to get involved in her care, but the social worker wasn't very forthcoming about anything to do with the care agencies. And when it was going to come to the time when she was going to be discharged from hospital, she asked the social worker whether it could be on a Monday rather than a Friday, because Friday is normally the day that they discharge people. And the reason for that being was because both Mr. and Mrs. B don't have a lot of care on a weekend. They have more care during the week. So she was wanting to go home on the Monday because she knew she would have her ordinary carers there during the week, so that she could get used to the way things were, and so that she was prepared for the weekend rather than go home on a Friday and not have the right care there, not have the right support there. But unfortunately, the social worker basically has said to her, hang on, sorry, I have made some more notes. I'm just trying to find them here.
That's fine.
So the social worker basically told her, you can't decide when you go home. It's not up to you. We tell you when you can go home. And so she was a bit taken aback with that. And Miss B tried to explain again the reason for that, and the social worker was having none of it. The social worker also didn't want to include Mr. B in any of the conversations she had about being discharged from hospital. Now, to me, that is totally incorrect. You know, somebody's family, somebody's husband should be included within that. But the social worker really wasn't keen on him being involved in anything to do with that discharge. And I think the reason why she wanted him to be there was because they would have to work out their own different care plans when she got home. Because Mr. B worked, so he has to be up early. He has to sort of, get ready for work. And if it was going to cause like a little bit of problems, she needed to know that he was involved in the conversations around her discharge. But fortunately, Mr. and Mrs. Bain, knowing who they are and what they need, they didn't take that very lightly. And so the next meeting that they had, Mr. B was there along with his PA, and one of Mrs. B's sort of regular carers was there as well. The social worker came in and she didn't want them there. She asked them to leave, and Mrs. B said, no, this is my husband, he should be involved, and these are our carers, and I want these involved as well. So unfortunately for the social worker, she did have to speak to them all, but she didn't want to do that. Mrs. B said she knew by her reaction to when she came into the room and she saw them all sitting there, that she knew that she didn't want them involved. On the day before Mrs. B was discharged, the social worker came in and she said, right, we've got the care agency sorted out and you're going home tomorrow, which was a Friday. Now, bearing in mind what Mrs. B had asked the social worker not to do, the social worker discharged her on the Friday. And she then gave her a list of care agencies, which Mrs. B had been asking for weeks and weeks. But by then it was too late because the care agency had already been organised. And so it all was a bit rushed at the end. She went home on the Friday. They hardly had any care over the weekend. And the agency that the social worker actually arranged was an agency that Mr. B had used a couple of years before that. And the agency actually phoned him up one day and just told him that they couldn't provide care for him anymore, and he was left in the lurch. So knowing that, and that agency was still going to be going in to see Mrs. B, they didn't have any faith at all in that agency. And it just seems to me that the social worker at the time just didn't listen to anything that she was saying. And that's a really poor situation, because Mrs. B is very articulate. She knows her own mind. She knows what she needs. She knows what she wants. If that had been somebody else who maybe didn't, hadn't had a social worker involved in their life, they didn't know what they could do and what they couldn't do. It just seems it seems a sort of that I don't know whether it was the individual social worker, I don't know whether it was the situation, I don't know whether it was down to finance. I don't know what happened, but Mr. and Mrs. B weren't happy at all about what the social worker had not done, basically. Yeah. And Mrs. B was also still having nursing care during the night, but when she went home, she had no nursing care at all. And that had been talked about. Mrs. B had asked the social worker about any nighttime care. The social worker said, no, you're not going to get any nighttime care. Mr. B said, well, what if she's in pain during the night, which she was still getting pain medication in the hospital. What if she needs to use a bedpan? That was, and all the social worker had said, well, we can't work on what ifs. So it wasn't even a discussion topic. And I don't know, this made me really think about, I looked up the Social Work England's professional standards. I looked at the BASBA Code of Ethics, and I thought, this is really poor. This is poor treatment. And if this social worker is like that with them, then she's going to be like that with everybody who's been discharged from hospital, who needs care. And I just don't understand the logic in any of it.
And when we were thinking about when you were telling us what you might want to talk about tonight, the other part of the standards you talked about was establish and maintain the trust and confidence of people, wasn't it? And I suppose, it's really difficult to see how, with so many kind of issues there, how the people you're talking about could have kind of confidence in the profession, I suppose, if in all those ways they were being kind of, I don't know, denied what appear on the surface to me anyway, reasonable requests, Yeah. And yeah. I mean, one of the things I think, I've just been making little notes as you've been going there, and you started off by talking about listening, and I think listening is a fundamental skill in social work, isn't it? To be able to just sit quietly with people and listen to what they're saying, so you get the sense of how they feel and where they're at with things. And given that across adult and children's social work, we're tasked and work in a strengths-based way, you'd think you'd want to include family members and current PAs, care staff, or whatever in those discussions. I don't know. What do you think, Jamie, as well?
I think it's difficult. It's difficult. We don't have that social work here, and I think I can understand, looking from both sides. I can understand how some of the decisions were made, and I think some of those decisions would have been made, and not by the social worker. I'd be very surprised if the social worker had much say over the discharge date. That would be something that normally is not under the social worker's control. It's sometimes social workers don't like to interview or have conversations with people when partners are there, especially because of gender imbalances and things. Obviously that's happened in this case, but I don't know. It'd be interesting to know, what the social worker's view is. So I think it's easy to jump on something that was bad practice, and it might have been, but it's difficult to say without speaking to a social worker person. Obviously, we're not going to get that opportunity to do that. But I think what's important to note is that was that person's experience, and that was a negative experience, and I think it goes back to that point about listening to people and communicating with people and having some kind of empathetic value to what we do with social workers. So I can as all I'm just saying, I can. I mean, my brain was going on saying, what happened there, and it could have been this, and it could have been that, and we just generally don't know. It could have been horrible practice, or it could have been something beyond social workers' control. Although trying to manage the situation the best they could. Things like budgets and nighttime care is always a difficult thing. It's not always the social workers' decision because of budget limitations. But I think an important takeaway is how we communicate with those people that we're working with, and I think that needs to be. I think it's always a bit of a juggling act, because in some respects you feel you don't want to go out there and paint a negative picture of the people you're working for or the budget limitations that you're in. But I think sometimes we need to be honest with people and say, this is why we're doing this way. This is why I want to do it this way. Challenge me on that, and then we'll see. I'll get some advocacy in, and we'll see. And yeah, I know the people you're discussing, and I think that would have been an avenue certainly that they would have went down. And I think it's a really important reason. I really think it's really important that we do that. I think advocacy is essential in social. I don't know about yourself, Stephen, and I don't know about your area, George, and children and families. Is we actively promote advocacy so we can solve this. We can stop these issues developing.
It's about I mean, why ever those decisions were made, isn't it? It's about explaining them to people in such a way that they can understand why that decision is being made. And that, like, I take your point about hospital discharge. I remember being involved in hospital discharges as a practitioner, and you know, you were in hot water with the hospital, and they'd be ringing your manager if you didn't get them out within the timescale that they wanted you to get them out of hospital.
Fined, didn't you?
Absolutely.
I don't know if that still happens now. I think that might have.
I know.
It used to be a case of they used to be a fine, and if you didn't get them out, get them out. It's horrible thing. And I think it raises some interesting questions. That perhaps I think the hospital discharge, whole process is. I really always get quite frustrated because it just dehumanizes the whole system, and it dehumanizes human beings, because we'd say, oh, they're being boarded out to another ward, and I get so angry. And you're talking about a human being, you're talking about boarding somebody out. They're not just we're not a factory kind of moving somebody from place to place. They're a human being, because you'd be talking about them as they're human beings, and that was quite frustrating. So, but when you get a person who's in that system, which I don't think anyone intentionally dehumanizes them. I think it's just because the system's so vast. But I think it's our role is to kind of bring it back into the role of this one-to-one interaction with human beings. I think that's really important as social workers. We do that, but can't really point now. Went in a bit of a rant. Sorry about that.
I was, and I'm just thinking, I'm going to weave a bit of. I don't suppose is it philosophy? Aristotle. So if he was a philosopher.
Oh yeah.
He was a philosopher.
I think one of the main guys, wasn't he?
Going to weave a bit of Aristotle.
20.
I'm going to weave a bit of Aristotle in here because I've been thinking about this. I do a session on communication, difficult communication, it's called, and with social workers, and I weave in a bit of Aristotle. And Aristotle has these modes of persuasion, he calls them, and the three things are ethos, pathos, and logos: ethics, emotion, and logic. And I think those three things are always at play whenever we're having conversations, particularly in the highly charged atmosphere of the hospital ward, where nobody wants to be in hospital, everybody wants to be out, but they absolutely want to be out within a framework that supports them as an individual and not necessarily the system. One of the things I wrote down here was, it seems that the discharge possibly was tailored around systems rather than tailored around people. So Aristotle's three things are first of all, the ethics. The person that you are trying to persuade, Aristotle would put it, but the person you're having the conversation with needs to know that you're an ethical person, rooted in wanting to do the best and wanting to do well for people. I would say that's the ethics of social work. We've got them to refer to. So first of all, it's ethics, but then it's understanding that there's an emotional content to the whole thing, which there obviously is. And then the final part, the logos, the logic, is whatever you're telling people has to be logical. So if the social worker is just saying, no, you can't go home on a Monday, you have to go home on a Friday, well, that's just that's almost a confrontational statement rather than a statement from a logical position, which would be, I'm sorry, but that's when people have to go home from hospital because that's what the hospital demands. That's a more logical, understandable position than, no, you just have to go home on a Friday. Well, why? Why do I have to go home on a Friday? That's not logical. Surely I can go home any day. Well, it has to be for these reasons. Then whatever those reasons, whether those reasons are good or bad, at least you've stated a logical position. So I think that's what came to mind, and in that, those three things, I think, build trust. And I think if you can build trust with individuals, then they're more likely to kind of go along with you and understand that you are trying to do your best for them. But if you keep putting up barriers to people all the time, and really what's going on there is an exertion of power, isn't it? No, I'm the social worker and I will do this to you, whatever the reason is behind it, system stuff, availability of services, that kind of thing. The attitude is one of power, rather than handing power back to the individuals and saying, well, it has to be this way, so I'll explain to you why it has to be this way. And I think that gets you a long way, doesn't it? Do you think? Yeah.
I think there's a kind of issue. I think the vast majority, much more than 99% of people who are in any kind of current profession, whether for NHS or for social work, or all come for the right reasons, all come because they want to make a difference, and ultimately because that's how they see some kind of value in what they do with their professional lives. But I think there's a bit of a pull between those values and the systems that people work in.
Yeah,
and I think the systems are there for the right reasons as well. But the systems fit the mass of people, the majority of people. They're not there for the individual. They're there to suit, hospital discharge is there to suit everyone to be discharged from the hospital, which is thousands of people. When the social is shouting for the rights of one individual, there's a conflict there, isn't there? And that becomes a conflict within the individual social worker. And how do they deal with that? So sometimes it might be a case of they don't deal with it well, and that's what happens maybe in this instance where the person who needs the service hasn't been maybe not kind of good deal, or haven't been explained to properly, or the kind of work with the system and manage in the way they can control, or the kind of fight against it. I think they're the three options, and I think sometimes it takes a more skilled social worker to do that second option, is to work within the system, control what they can control, but able to communicate that to the person, and maybe challenge where appropriate for the person's rights, so the system doesn't overwhelm.
I'm going to bring Louise. Go on, George. Go on. I
was going to say something similar to Jamie, and I think Louise's answer, Equeb scenario, is a good one, because if you split it up, is the individual worker, do they not morality by spirit, but are they like Jamie says, most people that go into this profession want to do well for the person, have got good feelings, good thoughts about it. Then are their actions, so they might say one thing or they might believe one thing, but then do they act in that way? And then the third one is like the system bit. Is that moral? So you could, I think, in your scenario, Louise, I think if we don't give them the benefit of the doubt, Jamie did, you've got somebody that's saying, I'm not going to do it for you. I'm not going to help you, more or less, isn't it? So that's the first two gone. And then it's a crap system as well, because the system didn't have a check and balance and say, no, you are going to go out and sort this woman out. We are going to provide this. It's fallen down on all three counts, isn't it, really, the scenario that you've said?
Yeah.
The bottom line is the person didn't get a good, or didn't feel they were listened to, and they didn't get the service that they were asking for and they needed. And I think, and that's where the problem that needs to be addressed and challenged is that area. I don't think there's any. I think maybe just look at the systems rather than the individual worker. I think is because I think that's probably that's where I would look at it. Back in my day, I suppose.
Yeah, Louise, back to you, because we've talked for ages there after you presented this. So tell me what you think.
I can see everybody's point of view. I think what they felt was that the social worker didn't take anything that they were saying into consideration. I think the discharge process is fine for most people, but I think if you have some kind of impairment, if you are disabled in some way, it's different. It's completely different from somebody else being discharged from hospital. I remember when I had a hip replacement 11 years ago now, and my consultant is actually the same consultant that Mrs. B had, but a broken leg. So he's lovely. And he told me at that time that I could spend as much time as I needed in hospital, because I didn't know what I was going to be able to do or not do when I got home. And I spent, most people with the hip operation, I think, leave within 4 days. I was in for 11 days, and then I was discharged. And that felt really personalized, because he took on board what I was saying. He was then talking to the staff as well in the hospital, and I stayed in for 11 days. Now, Mrs. B was in hospital for 8 weeks because he was saying to her, the consultant was saying to her, that she was in the best place possible. He didn't really want her to go home any earlier. She didn't know whether he was involved in the discharge process, because she did have a discharge nurse as well who wanted her to get out of the hospital as soon as possible. But it was the consultant that said, no, you're in the best place possible. And I think, like I say, I think for the majority of people leaving hospital, the discharge process is fine. It works. But I think for those few people where it's not easy, you don't know what you're going to be like when you leave hospital. You have other impairments that impact on your hospital stay as well. So it should be personalised for those people who the discharge process isn't working.
We're dealing with kind of layers of uncertainty. You like this kind of stuff, don't you, George? We're dealing with anybody discharged from hospital. You're dealing with a level of uncertainty about what it's going to be like when you get home, aren't you? Yeah. But I suppose with people with specific needs, people with disabilities, you're talking about extra layers of uncertainty, aren't you? Around that, all the methods or the adaptations that they would use, are they now fit for purpose as well for doing things that nobody might have considered, I suppose, which I suppose taps into the not being discharged on a Friday but a Monday, doesn't it? It's that uncertainty of the weekend when anybody that's involved in any sort of services knows that everybody disappears at 5 o'clock on a Friday night to Monday morning. So it's layers of uncertainty, isn't it, George? It's that, yeah, and risk, I suppose.
Yeah, I don't know if this answers your point, but I wonder whether we can moralise and all we want, but if the supply of services isn't there, if the availability of good services isn't there, what can be done? You could have a nice social work, take all the opinions, but if the service at the end is crap, it's all for naught, isn't it, really? Mm. And I feel we're entering a time where the number of sick, disabled people is increasing, and the services are diminishing. It seems it's going one way and the other. And I suppose if we all imagine with that person, I'd rather have the good service than the good social work assessment. Or am I being naive? I don't know. I know that they're intertwined, but like if really brilliant carers came out to that lady, almost regardless of what the social worker did, I know they would have to do something.
Yeah.
That bit's gone and she's looked after and she's happy with her family. Do you see what I mean? So I understand there's an A to B, but if the B isn't there, if there isn't a good service, that's the bit I'm struggling with at the moment.
What use is the good social worker if at the end of the day the services at all?
Yeah, but
and I suppose you use the word. Sorry, Jim.
Sorry. Is that not just us three saying that as social workers? Is that what's Louise's view on that? Is like,
definitely.
Is curiosity, well, what's the kind of point in good social work, I suppose, if there's not an outcome because there's resources on there? But what's your view on that, Louise? Do you think would you prefer like to have a good social worker and say, we can't deliver the service in the way you want because of, but do it in a way that's really positive and empowering for yourself as much as that can be without any service?
Yeah, I would rather the social worker be honest with me and say, we might not be able to give you everything that you need. We can do this, that, and the other, but we can't do this, that, and the other thing. I would rather that happen rather than the social worker not listen to anything that I've said. And I think it's come across in like the other scenarios I have. I think listening to somebody has come across in all of them, where I've asked people what they thought, and that is one of the main things, is listening and actually taking on board what the individual is saying, and being honest. I think is a good thing. The individual is being honest with the social worker, so the social worker should be able to be honest with the individual that they're working for.
I think there's a parallel with we have a service sometimes comes in to talk to the first year students, where they're working with people who've had children removed, and sometimes a mother who's had a child removed comes in. So there is a parallel here, and what she says all the time when she comes in is, I just want the social worker to be honest with me, but to accept that I'm maybe not going to like what she tells me, but that's all right. And I do think in those situations it's up to us as the professional, for want of a better word, in those circumstances to just accept that we're going to have to deliver a difficult message, deliver it with honesty and integrity, and just accept that the person's not going to be very impressed with what we're telling them, but just then it's up to us to deal with that, isn't it, as the social worker there. Jamie, sorry.
I think no, it's okay. I think it's kind of multi-layered, isn't it? Because you go out there and especially in situations like that, is you want to support a positive conversation that's going to keep the person positive about the process that's going about to happen. And you might have doubts in your head. You're thinking, oh, well, I'm concerned with the care agencies. I'm concerned with the quality of the service that the person might be getting. But you don't want to share that with the person, because then it's going to put it might jeopardize that what's about to happen. So you're a bit more reserved. You don't sometimes. I was going to think you're always honest with about the services that might happen, because sometimes it might jeopardize what's going to happen, because the person's going to go home with a negative view already before they even start. And I think it's a very difficult thing when you go there in the back of your head, and people are talking about when we're care home, and you think, oh, I'm still a bit concerned about this, or I'm going to put carers in, I'm still a bit concerned about this care agency, but that's the only one I've got. And so you don't. I get Louise's point, but if you shared that, that's going to jeopardize the whole, the care package and what's going to happen forward. So you, as a social, you've got that difficult balance to be. I want to be honest and truthful, and I want to be as much as I can, but sometimes I hold a little bit back, because if I'm too truthful, I just don't want to paint such a negative picture of what might be available for you. And I think I don't know the answers to that. I don't know.
Yeah, I get what you were saying, Jamie, because I have heard from other disabled people where the social worker has mentioned budgetary constraints, and they're saying, I don't want to know about your budget. That's not what I want to know about. I want to know if you can do what I've asked you to do. So it's an awful balancing situation.
And I think they're quite within the right to say that as well. But yeah, I think it's now. Sometimes I think maybe that we'll maybe come to the crux of it. Yeah, is that sometimes it can be so complicated, this relationship that we'll have with people, and we'll try and we'll try and show it as a much more simple one than it is. But how do you do that? How do you have that company? So you're sitting there thinking, right, you have the person want to know budgets, because that's my problem. But how do I be honest with them and tell them how that we might be able to get nighttime support, because it's not within my control. It's within my manager's control, it's within the head of services control, or the panel's control. But I can't have that conversation with the person because they don't want to know, because they're just fighting for their own rights to have what they need, which is quite within their rights. And the social worker has to have that in a conflict within themselves, and then come up with the right solution. And perhaps that didn't happen this time. So I think Stephen, the important point is that what's right to deliver with one person might not be right to deliver with somebody else. So, I think that's where sometimes social workers might get wrong, because they've got to make a subjective call, don't they, on a quite an objective decision.
Yeah. No. Louise is utilising 1.4 here in the Social Work England standards, which sits under promote the rights, strengths and well-being of people, families and communities. And I'm going to focus on the promote the rights bit. Do you think that as social workers we're not political enough? Because I'm a bit I'm in two minds about this, talking to people about budgets, because really it's of no consequence whatsoever to the person on the end of the social work intervention whether there's a budget there or not. Why should we be troubling people? I get your point about honesty, and I understand that, and I think that's probably right. Really, it's better to tell people, but what do they care? What do they care if there's no budget or not? What do they care about that? George has left us. He's had to slope off somewhere. So we're left with the three of us. But that's all right. You know what I mean. So in that, the problem with not enough budget is a political one, isn't it? Really. And how politically active do we think that social workers should be? I suppose is the question.
I suppose it's a difficult conversation. We've all had it. Is it where you're having a difficult conversation with the team manager or with the service manager with panel, and you're challenging, you almost argued, probably the wrong word, you have a conversation about why is, and you're advocating strongly for what you think should happen, and then but they're saying this is how you should be meet these needs, and you're going to be least restrictive, and so there's often some kind of debate and pullback, and I think it's easy to call people who call budgetary strings, but I found that every time, as long as you deliver a strong justification why you need something, you get it. But I think it's a skill to be able to do that. I'm not calling managers because they've got a difficult job to do to allocate very finite resources.
Well, and that was one of the things.
But I think the important point is that you will have you may be fighting for what you think is right with somebody, with some management within the structure, but the person will never ever know that you've done that. And so, in this case, we don't know. We generally don't know. That person would have been having lots and lots of discussions and debates with managers about that nighttime service, and your friends will never know this, because it's not something you would share. I don't think you should. No, should you? I don't know.
I think what talking about that as well. It's health to our parent at the moment for her extra carers and everything, and she did have to call it. I think they're called rapid response during the night one time. Just a couple of times, and they've had to come out, and they couldn't understand why she wasn't on their books, because they got in touch with I think another company, and then that other company sent two carers out, and they couldn't understand why she wasn't on their books to have possible nighttime care. So it wasn't social services who were sort of paying for this or arranging this. It was health who were sorting out.
Yeah,
I think the question is like who was responsible for that decision to be made. If it was health funding, it would be unlikely than the social worker. But I don't know. Particular system
did do sort of, I suppose, the assessment for discharge.
I think it comes back to me. I'm just thinking of this. That's something that we've talked about before. A couple of things. I suppose it comes down to the quality of the social worker, doesn't it? And this is something we can't legislate for, because in all professions, there are good doctors and not so good doctors. There are good nurses and not so good nurses. There are good social workers and not so good social workers. And sometimes, it comes down to the pressure they might be under and all those kind of things. But it also comes down to how the particular social worker, and I make no judgment about this social worker because I don't know them, but it comes down to that thing we've talked about before, where the social work is a science, an art, or a job. And to some people it's a job, and some people fall into that trap of processing people, don't they? And that's not, and I think in terms of just to take us back to Social Work England standards, there's nothing in Social Work England standards about processing people. Do you know what I mean? It's all about upholding the rights of people, and working in a humane, person-centered kind of strengths-based way, isn't it? But there will always be people in all person-facing roles who ultimately see it as a job, and we can't really legislate for that, can't we? And actually, the social worker you get is a bit of a lottery, isn't it?
I think I've said this before, is that, you know, we teach social workers to become critical thinkers and to be creative in how they approach difficult situations and problems. And then once they're in the first few years of employment, they're in this vast system, and they've got to find their own voice in this vast system, and it's very, very hard. So sometimes what happens, I think that happened to me early in my career, is that you just become part of the system, and you almost kind of in this processing business, which is not right. And I think it's once you become a bit experienced and a bit confident, you start saying, well, hang on, no, we need to kind of adjust the system for this, and we need to change the system for that, especially for people who've got, you know, additional support needs, who don't fit in the system as what's happened here. When you kind of adjust, and that's why we have social work, so we can do that. But I think at first it was very, very hard, because the system is so vast and so big, and it feels so powerful when you first qualified. Did you find that, Stephen, when you first qualified as a social worker?
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it's very easy to be absorbed into the system, and in fact, it's a very comfortable place to be early on in your career, when you don't really know how to do things, and you easily forget. Something that I'm bleating on all the time to students and newly qualified social workers about all the time is rooting yourself in why are you doing this, because that roots you in your values. But no, you easily become immersed in, how do I do this? How do I fill this form in? How do I get this person out of hospital? How do I manage this care package? Rather than, why am I getting this person out of hospital? Why am I managing this care package? Why am I sat by this person's bedside? And I think if you root yourself in why, you give a very different response to people than if you're rooted in how. You know, I think that's so. Yes, I think when people are newly qualified, they easily slip into how.
Sorry.
No, it's all right. You easily slip into how. You easily slip into, how do I do this, rather than, why am I doing this? Why am I sat at this person's bedside? Why are they asking for their husband to be involved? You know, hang on a minute. I'm based in how. I want to know how to get you out of hospital. You're asking me why-based questions, not how-based questions. You know, and I'm hanging on to how-based questions because the rest of it doesn't fit in the system quite as easily. I don't know, Louise. Final thought from you. What do you think of what we've made of this? You've raised a very kind of, well, you know what the worry is as well. You haven't raised what is an uncommon problem. That's the concern. Isn't it? It's not an uncommon problem. You know, lots of people get very good social work, but we hear stories, and you'll hear stories all the time of things that haven't gone quite right. And without necessarily pointing the finger at individuals, if it's individuals, we need to fix that. If it's systems, we need to fix that. What is it we need to fix? You know. So I don't know. Final thought from you.
Oh, dear me. I don't know. I don't think there's an easy answer to anything. No, I think it's a bit of everything. I think the systems, the money's not there. We know. And that is so frustrating, and that I can understand how difficult it is for a social worker, and knowing that the budgets are constrained and they're getting smaller and smaller, and they're still having to provide some kind of assistance to people who really need that system. But you as social workers know that you can't afford that to give that person everything that they need. And it's not, I don't know, it's kind of a difficult thing, because I know a friend of mine who, another friend of mine, she's an independent advocate, and she works primarily with community mental health teams, but she goes to people, and her words were, some social workers are brilliant, some are crap, and some shouldn't be social workers at all. And She is a disabled person herself, so she also has care needs that she has to have help assistance with, and she said sometimes the social workers are really positive, sometimes they're negative, and so I don't think it's a question that's going to be answered. I can't see it being answered at all. What is the problems with things? I think it's a mixture of everything. I think even if you have a really, really excellent social worker, and I have got an example of a good social worker as well. She works in the transitional team, so she's working with a friend of mine's son who is going from children's services to adult services, and the first transitional social worker didn't understand what the lad's needs were at all, and she didn't even log that he'd been to see a psychologist for his anxiety. Now, the second transitional social worker that they've got is absolutely brilliant. She takes everything on board. She's thorough, and she thinks about his independence. She thinks about his progression and where he wants to be. She listens to his aspirations and tries to help him achieve them. So that isn't, I don't think that's money related. I think that is her listening to what this lad needs, and she's able to help him achieve what he needs. So I don't think there's an easy answer there to anything. I think it's an ongoing thing, and we know this has been ongoing for a long time, where social workers can't seem to do their job properly, and it's not necessarily because of them, it's because of other things that are wrong within the system.
Yeah, absolutely. The solution is quite straightforward. Where we allow Keir Starmer to rise to power, and we have a Labour government who actually care about people and not the money markets. That might make a difference. What do you think, Jamie?
Yeah, most definitely. My final point I would say would be, we can sit and we can think about what happened on all these, because obviously this happens time and time again, which just shouldn't happen, but people have these negative experiences about why it might happen. And it's difficult because we don't have the facts. But I think what we need to take away from this is that's what happened, is that person's truth. And that's what we need to be listening to. That's their experience and that's their truth. And, when somebody has, a leg breaking in hospital and has additional disabilities and, needs support, and they in their family, they need support as well. So that needs to be accommodated. And if that's their experience, it can't be right. And we've got to listen to the truth. We've got to listen to their truth, not our reasons for their truth. And then the systems need to adjust to make sure that their truth doesn't happen. And I think the only way to do that is, as you said, Stephen, is to let Keir Starmer rise to power, and we'll have to. I think system change needs to happen on that level. I think we need political change, because I qualified in 2002, so I've seen the Blair years and Brown years, and then seen the change after that, and I think we desperately return back to those years, and have that quality of service that we used to have. That's it.
Absolutely.
Well done.
Yes. Well done. Thanks, Louise, for raising that. I suppose my last thing would be, only because I've been preparing stuff around strengths-based practice, Dennis Salibi, who was writing about this stuff in the 1990s. This is not a new thing. This is not a new idea that we work with people's strengths at all. He talks about the fact that people are competent in their own lives and they have capacities that we need to draw on. And the bit we forget is people thrive on having the courage to kind of move on in their lives and move forward in their lives. And I think we sometimes don't work with people in an aspirational way. We work with people's we still work with people's deficits rather than helping people aspire to the goals that they want to achieve in their lives. So I think, you know, that's in my mind as I think about strengths-based practice as well, which I think permeates through everything we've said. And I'm now going to open my emergency snowball. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Louise, for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure. And you've raised so many pertinent questions that I'm sure me and Jamie will also take up with a lot of the students that we work with as well. And you can, when you come in, you can ask them those questions as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you for letting me join. It's been really interesting.
Pleasure, absolute pleasure.